Two, three.
Okay, good morning. I'm Adele from Transition Clarity, and here we are going to have another authentic conversation with Lina Girgis, and she is an author of the book called Liberation: Secrets of the Soul. So let's enjoy this conversation. So good morning.
Good morning, Adele. How are you?
Good, good, good. So let's just go a little bit into your background of how this book came about. Like, so have you always been a person who has been into the word, has been into writing, has been into sharing stories?
Yes and no. So I had my degree in English literature and English language.
Mm-hmm.
So many years ago, and of course for 4 years of my life all I did was studying English literature, novels, short stories, poetry, essay writing, and all these things. And I also studied linguistics, the history of languages and how they evolved and all that, and the language trees all over the world and all this. So I had been a reader for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
I mainly read literary fiction, so that's what I enjoy reading the most. But only like my passion for creative writing only came to light when I was 35. So before that, I didn't explore writing at all. Maybe like a little bit, but nothing, like on the professional level or anything like that. But only when I was 35 did I realize that I just started writing. It started by writing some poems in my mother tongue.
Okay.
And then I wrote some poems in English as well. But again, nothing made it to an anthology or anything. It was just for me, and I shared it only with my close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then 5 years later I decided to, like, I thought, why don't I write short stories in English? Because why not? And I just I started, I wrote the first draft of my very first short story back in 2015.
Okay.
And after that, the idea, like at the beginning, I had no idea that I wanted to write a book. But then, I wrote one story after another, and then I had this idea of why don't I collect them in one book, and I started to plan for the book. And yeah, and it took the journey to bring the book to light took 5 years, from the day I wrote the first draft of the first short story until the book came to light and it was available.
Mm-hmm.
It took 5 years exactly.
Well, and I've heard that from many, many people who have written books. It's the book of love and passion. It's not about making millions and millions of dollars, right? Like,
No.
like there are some authors that...
especially when you are a new writer and you're not famous. It's not really making any money. It's just for myself, to get whatever inside me out. And of course, like, it's the joy of creating. This is the writing for me is the joy of creating. It's exactly like painting, creating something that hadn't existed before. And once it's out, of course, it's the joy of having other people read what I wrote. So that's another part of it too, is have readers to read what I wrote, because I don't just write for myself. It makes me happy to know that other people read what I write and enjoy it. So
okay, so earlier you had said, like, in your native tongue. So can we explore a little bit about you and where are you from? Because I know now you're living in Canada and in Calgary. So where is that native tongue? Where is that? Where did
Yeah,
where did Lina
sure.
start? Just to
Okay,
give the listeners a
so
little bit of background of the child growing up to become this writer.
of course, yeah, of course. So yeah, I was born and raised in Egypt to Egyptian parents. And that's where I grew up. I went to school. I had friends as a child. And I decided to move to Canada in my early 20s. So I was still single back then. I came by myself. But most of my extended family were already here in North America. So that made it easier for me to move on my own. And my sister had already moved to Alberta as well. So yeah, so I moved in my early 20s. So by now I've almost lived half of my life in Cairo, Egypt, and the other half in Calgary, Alberta.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So as a child, did you find that you were fascinated with stories, or like, because I find it's like, okay, and I don't mean to put words into your mouth, but it was like kind of odd that all of a sudden 35 you go, I want to write stories. Like, wasn't it kind of like milling around as a child? Well,
Of
okay, the
course, yeah.
reason I'm asking this is because everyone who says, if you really want to find what you're supposed to do in life, what did you play with as a child
Okay.
that you never, time just flew by? So
I see what you mean.
were words
Yeah.
something that you were fascinated by, like you love to learn, you liked how they strung together, like with people talking, you'd be like, that was an interesting sentence.
Yes, yes, definitely. Now that I'm thinking about it, yes, of course. So as a child and growing up, I always enjoyed like listening to a good story from my mother, for example. I remember asking her repeatedly to tell me specifically stories about when I was younger, when I was a child, and stories about my grandparents, for example, and the family, and stories about like the time when my mother was a child. So that's one thing. The other thing is also I've always all my life enjoyed like watching a good movie, like appreciating a good story line. And again, my study of English literature was a big part of it because I read so many novels and short stories, and and I appreciated them a lot. I also like songs and lyrics, and even as a child, now that I remember that myself and my sister and my cousins, like whenever we got together, sometimes we did write some lyrics for songs, and we would write like random music to it and just sing it out loud. So yeah, there must have been some roots to that, definitely.
So, and that's interesting because I wouldn't call myself a writer in any means, but I do, since I was really little, I've always journaled. I've always had those running thoughts, like, get out of my head, get in my heart, get it on paper and see what comes of it. And this is where even like, coming in as into technology and stuff, and you got to put that writing out, and I'm just like, I don't share my writing. And so even the thing of a little post, right? You're like, does that sound right? Should I rewrite it? And it's like, oh, and I'm like, so I honor the people that are able to actually get it out, right?
Oh yeah, it takes so much courage.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy,
Yeah. And just the fact that you want people that are close to you to read it.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, no, isn't it easier if strangers are reading it? Or in my case, I'm like, I don't care if it's stranger readers, but people who actually know me, like, I'll be like, no.
Yeah, what I found was very helpful to me was, like training myself and learning this skill of being, of accepting criticism and making use of it, like how to make it useful, even if it's like harsh sometimes,
Yeah, and
Um,
that's where that word can be quite harsh.
mhm,
Like redirected guidance, or like, maybe look at how this is written in a different way, right? Because
yep,
a person who actually wants you to thrive isn't truly criticizing. They're just giving you different ways of looking at a certain chapter, or looking at a different way of expressing what you're
yep,
feeling or what you're saying, or what, right? Because I know a young lady who did the linguistic learning of like not a sorry, a language that isn't known to her,
mhm.
right? With the professor giving them no guidance and no help, and they weren't
Oh,
allowed to ask for help.
wow.
And I'm
Mhm.
like, well, how are you supposed to pass that class, right? But
Yeah.
yet, in a way, like, she's a dancer, and I'm like, how interesting that she's taking the written word and expressing it through dance,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
as you said, like, the cover of your book is one of your personal paintings,
Yes.
right?
Yeah,
And so
it's
you're
right
taking
behind me over
yeah,
there.
it's like you're taking the written word, and I find it's fascinating because it looks like you're sitting on your knees looking
Mhm.
at the
Here's
heavens,
the book.
yeah,
Yeah.
and saying, like, bring the words through me. I'm here as you're like, be my muse so I can write,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's very, very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also shows that art isn't one form,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Like, whether you're dancing it, whether you're speaking it, whether you're painting it, whether you're, in a
Yeah.
dialogue, it takes all forms. And how has this form shaped your life?
Right. Right. And because I'm a painter too, like I love painting,
Mm-hmm.
and when I write, sometimes I feel like I'm painting with words, like I'm drawing with words. I'm trying to get to give this to give the full picture to the reader, so
Mm-hmm.
that they feel that they are right there in the scene. They can see everything, they can feel everything, they can smell everything, hear everything. So that's mainly my style in writing, is to to describe everything. Some people find it like too many details, but to me it's you can never have too many details when it comes to trying to engage the reader,
Mm-hmm.
because it makes them feel that they are right there. So
Well, and to that point of too many details, the person who is an avid reader, if they're finding it's too many details, has trained their brain to skip over all the details that they don't actually feel they need,
true,
right?
true.
Other
Yeah,
people might say, oh, I wish you would have put more in,
exactly,
right? So
exactly.
you're
Yeah.
doing but then it was interesting, like, especially over the last couple of years of that you're supposedly locked in, right?
Mhm.
And this is where the readers of the world are going, you're never locked in. You open up a
Yeah.
book and you go, let's explore,
Exactly.
right? And I even said this to someone in one of my coaching sessions the other day. I was like, well, instead of saying what you can't do, why don't you get on the internet and figure out where you can go when you can go?
Hmm.
Start
Hmm.
planning it now, and let's see which adventure manifests, right?
Right.
And yeah, and it was just like, taking that same thing and just spinning it, right? It's like that critique. It's like, no, just spin it a different way. Like,
Yeah.
How can we look at what we think is a bad thing and go and play in
And
the sunset or the
yeah,
sunrise, or you know?
totally. I can totally relate to what you're saying because, the pandemic and the lockdown of 2 years was never like a big problem for me.
I know.
I actually enjoyed it in a way because I'm an introvert by nature and I like to spend time with myself.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a perfect opportunity to read, to write, to watch movies, and even though we couldn't, I love traveling, I
Mhm.
love traveling, but of course for 2 years we were not able to travel as much.
Or we
But
try differently.
I didn't miss traveling. I took it as an opportunity to rediscover Calgary,
Yeah.
because I realized that there are so many places and neighborhoods and areas and parks in Calgary that I hadn't even known they existed. So
Yeah.
so that's again that brings me to treasuring the here and now.
Yeah.
That's my main thing now at this stage of my life. Treasure the here and now. If you can't be happy here, you won't be happy anywhere else.
Well, because you're
So
everywhere you are.
mhm.
So if
And the
you,
now, to the power of now, like
yeah,
I don't want to think about tomorrow. I
yeah,
don't, like, who knows what will happen.
yeah.
Nobody does.
And we're only given the presence,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
So just enjoy the moment and
Well, and that
really.
brings up a different conversation, and it's not so much as writing, but it could be as writing, because if someone's not being present and in the presence of now, and honoring the gifts that are being shown right now, that's where the depression of the past and the anxiety of the future come in.
Exactly.
And say there's a person, a young person or an older person, who's saying, well, would writing help this?
Hmm.
And in my case, that's probably why I started journaling from 4 or 5 years old.
Totally. Yeah.
It's like, well,
Yeah, for me too. Writing is therapeutic for sure.
yeah, right. And so it's like, yeah, so if you can get those anxiety thoughts or those depression thoughts out, so you can actually be in the present more,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so this is like, because I'm a movie buff too, and I just don't understand how people don't like them. Because I used to see what was coming up in the theaters and go, oh, this would be a good person to go with,
Hmm.
because the conversation after would be amazing. Or this movie, I'd go with this one because we'd laugh all the way through. Or have you ever looked at movies like that?
Sure. Like sometimes I go to the movies with friends and sometimes I go by myself,
I know.
I just enjoy the movie. Yeah, I do that sometimes. So yeah, but good point.
Well, and it's funny because there's a couple of them that I did go by myself, and I was just like, well, now who can I talk to with about this? Right?
Yes, yes. I
And
see
so I
what
was like,
you.
and that's why I like about like the book, or even movies, or what, like that artistic sharing, and
Hmm.
how everyone has their own impression of what the words are saying, and speaking to them by their own life experiences,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Just for instance, like I just finished the book by Jill Bolte Taylor, and
Okay.
she's a scientist, and her first book was about how she documented her stroke,
Okay.
and now she's written a scientific book in grade 3 of reading, like that I can understand, like I love it, that talks about the 4 parts of the brain,
Hmm.
and how all of them want their share, but not all of them can come out at the same time,
Okay.
right? So your brain 1 is like your type A personality, has to get things done. Your brain 2 is like that one that has 50 million stories of the same thing. It's like, okay, whatever, stop talking, right? Your brain
Hmm.
3 is just like, I want to go play. Like, all of you just be quiet. And then your brain forwards your Zen, and having that brain huddle to say,
Okay.
why is, the sad one coming out? Like, what's really going on? What's bringing you present? And what, like you're type A, you're trying to find those answers. Well, why are you striving so hard? Do we have to work so hard to get the answer? Right. And, and it was really interesting reading that, because I was like, oh, my sad part's just coming out way too much today. Let's zen her along and see what's going on. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just find that like the inspiration and the ideas that you can get, right? Or like you say about those fantasy books, right? Or those, how you can get lost and just forget about everything. Right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about your book. From what I understand, it's lots of different short stories of powerful women going on their journeys, and which is really interesting, because like that's kind of how I started my whole business, right?
Okay.
You're in that transition, and where do you get the strength to find the clarity to move forward, to say there's better than what I'm receiving right now. There's more than that I have the ability to grasp on.
Sure.
Right. And it brings us back to the presence, because we can't see what's being gifted. Okay, go.
Okay, so my book is a collection of literary fiction short stories about, relationships, breakups, wellness and illness, hope and despair, life and death, faith and doubt, peace and war. They are all very like familiar stories that we can all relate to in a way. But at the same time, they are unique enough to provoke thoughts and touch feelings. They are 16 short stories. Each one takes place in a different city in the world, from a different cultural background, at a different time or era. Like many of them are contemporary, happening in our present time. Some of them take place 20 years ago, 50 years ago. A few of them take place, like one of them take 2,000 some years ago, another one 10,000 years ago, even before the known recorded civilizations in history. This one is actually one of my favorites in the book. It's called Between Two Streams.
Okay.
It's actually like, it's the last short story I wrote. It doesn't come last in the book. It's somewhere in the middle, but it's the last one I wrote, and it's one of the shortest. It's only 10 pages, and it takes place somewhere in the Middle East, about roughly 10,000 years ago. It's fiction, but it's based on like some historical findings. Before the known civilization, when the matriarchal communities ruled, when the head of the tribe was the mother, when the gods were female, like the female figure was sacred, and women were worshipped, and even the menstrual blood was sacred and was given as offering to the goddess as a symbol of life.
Yeah.
So the story, in short, depicts like this era of the human history, and the beginning of the patriarchal influence at that time, because back then the like humans hadn't figured out the connection between the sexual process and reproduction, like bringing more people into the world. They hadn't figured out this connection. So to them, they just saw women getting pregnant on their own, having this, magical, powerful ability to give life, where men didn't have that. So that's exactly why women were worshipped and were considered sacred and powerful. And, and only when this connection was figured out, and of course, men realized their role in the process, and that it's not just the women who are able to do that. We have something to do with this. So that was, like the masculine reversal, like the beginning of the patriarchal influence and dominance in the world. And that's when all the patriarchal concepts and notions started to emerge, like the concept of fatherhood, the God being the father rather than the mother, religion, and like the concept of family and marriage and monogamy, and again, religion and wars and fighting over land, because all of a sudden land became sacred, and people, and that created the concept of patriotism and capitalism, and all these concepts are patriarchal in nature. And gradually the feminine role was it was being eliminated gradually until it was gone completely, almost, and except for the purpose of reproducing and housekeeping.
Well, yes and no. I think we needed to take a back seat, like depending on your philosophies and what you believe. Like the Piscean age, yes, the men had to rise up and start taking charge and whatever. But now that we're shifting into the new Aquarian age, there's going to be more of a balance.
For sure. And we are working on that already. It's been like we've come a long way, but I still believe that we still have a long way to go too.
Oh, but we're in infancy of this new 2,600 years.
Right? I agree.
And as a species, as a human being, we've never been here before.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's exactly the message of my little story there, is that like at the end of the story, the impact on the reader is simply that neither matriarchy by itself nor patriarchy by itself is good enough for the world, because we
all have our strengths and weaknesses.
What we need is a good balance and a good harmony between both energy, the feminine energy and the masculine energy.
Well, and I know when I'm coaching clients, like say on retirement, right? And they're like, oh, well, we want to retire. And I'm like, well, it's awesome, but you can't do it together. And I get that like blank look, and then they go, why not? I said, because one has to start a routine first as retirement while the other one's still working. And then you'll blend in somewhere when the second one retires. It doesn't matter who does it first, but if you do it together, you're too much together and you can split. I've seen it over and over, and it's just like, and they're shocked, but then they understand it, right? And I said, it seems to be like the 18-month, right? Seems to be that magic number, just like as if a couple's splitting. Men tend to get into relationships faster than women, right? Depending on the age of the kids. Right? Because if the kids are really young, the women don't have time. Like they're single moms, like forget it, there's no way. But if they're a little bit older, 18 months seems to be the thing. Could be less, could be more, either way, right? And so it's just, so when we think about like we need that balance, and we're in that infancy of like, okay, they're starting to let go of control, we're starting to go, well, we don't need control, but we want to be partnerships. How do we work together? And I look at it as right now we've just been born, we're a new brand baby. We don't know that we can roll over yet. We don't know, like we're trying to figure out that we have limbs, like, right? And
Yeah.
in time, it's gonna start growing. And yeah, this can go in a whole different ballgame, which I don't want to, because I want to stay with this. But I just think about the writers who can write the next 10 years are going to be fantastic, because it's going to be the biggest change we've ever seen in our human existence. That can be documented.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? Of that. And it's not even female, male. It's the feminine and the masculine, because we all have both.
Exactly.
Right? And I don't know.
We were created by the perfect union between the two energies, the feminine and the masculine. So we all have them in us, you know.
Yeah. And I find that it's really cool, like being born in Calgary, that I'm finding more of the artistic people, because growing up here, I was always like, this is a masculine city. It's a driven city. And like our average working age was, I think, 37. The last time I'm like, 37? Because by that, when I realized that, I was over 37. I was like, wow, no wonder you feel like you're always 10 feet behind.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because it's really driven, right? And you know, like with going to different towns, like there's just a different energy, and it's not good or bad. It's just like, it's different. Right? And I know like speakers who've come into Calgary, I always say, you haven't spoken anywhere until you speak in Calgary. And they're like, why is that? I said, because their energy is really different. Right? Yeah. We have a lot of sacred spaces up here and around, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So can you give an example of like one of the challenges and triumphs of one of your heroines?
Sure, I can give you a few examples here. Like, for example, the first story in the book, A Glimpse Inward, it tells about Elena, who through her encounter with an old friend, suddenly realizes that all her life she has mainly lived for others, for her family, for her children, for her job, for work, and has nothing for herself. But overnight, she unearthed her passion for creative writing and decided to start writing literary fiction. So that's one story. Another one with the title Hope tells about Christine, who realizes that she has only 3 months to live, and decides to start her journey to locate the biological mother of her adopted daughter, with whom she lost connection for the last 10 years or so. Will she find her? You know, so that's what the story about. Guilt or Grace is about.
Oh, wait, hang on. So the hope when the adoptive mother's trying to find the biological mother because she's dying to give the child back?
To find someone to take care of the child after leaving the child in the world, you know.
Because the child's still young.
Yeah, like
oh wow,
younger than 10. Yeah, like I think the child is 9 years old. Yeah.
Wow, that's a different way of looking at. Interesting.
Yeah. Another one, Guilt or Grace, about it tells about Virginia, who has cheated on her husband for years, and the day she decides to end this relationship is ironically the day she finds out about the fact that her husband is cheating on her with a coworker. And again, how she responds to that, and you know, how this
I was gonna say what's good for the goose isn't good for the gander.
And how this helps her to not only forgiving him, but also forgiving herself for what she has done.
Mhm.
Another one, Despair, it tells about Sophie, who has lived most of her married life in despair, simply waiting for death, waiting to die, losing any interest or enthusiasm to enjoy anything in life. And the day she decides to break through the gates of this prison and start to live is the day she faces death. Another one, another one is Liberation, which also one of my favorite stories in the book, and it's the title story. And by the way, my painting here is the main scene in this story, Liberation. So Liberation is also, it takes place somewhere in the Middle East again, about 2000 some years ago. And it tells the story about Marab. She is a woman living in a very masculine society, of course, back then, rejected by society. She has been emotionally lost, spiritually misplaced, and until she was able to restore her faith in humanity and the goodness of the universe through her encounter with Yesham. Yesham was like some sort of a spiritual, mystic person back then in their community. So yeah, so these are just a few examples of the stories.
And so are these just made up in your mind, or are they based
Many
on...
of them are. So, okay, so some of them were inspired by personal events that happened in my own life. Some of them were inspired by stories of people I know, co-workers, friends, family members. But of course, like when I get inspired by something like this, I take like the seed of the story and then I build around it from my imagination. So when I say inspired, I don't necessarily mean that the story is exactly and particularly everything that happens in the life of whoever inspired me. I usually like just take a piece and then build around it from my own imagination. And some stories are pure imagination from my head, like nothing, like exactly as the Between Two Streams, the one that I was talking about, that's pure imagination, So
yeah. No, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
I get inspired by talking to people. Simply.
Oh, I know. And yeah, like it was funny because I remember having a friend in high school saying, how do you find people who talk? Like you always have people that talk. And I said, well, I talk.
Yeah,
like
you
to
make
me,
people talk.
Well, that's a no-brainer. Like
skill.
you want to have that communication, you want to have that connection. And it's like, and I'm always looking for like, especially like because I've grown up here, I find the people that didn't.
Okay.
If you move from faraway lands to Calgary, you're going to find me. It's just guaranteed.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because a lot of my friends like are South African or European or like Colombian or like, and it's just like, yeah, nope. The further away, the more you find me, which is fun because then like I love the different culture aspects and the, and that's where the books come in handy too, again, right? Because you can immerse yourself into a culture and understand the culture before you ever decide to go visit it, or even if you don't visit it, you have an understanding of it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, you can learn about it.
And whether you're in Calgary or Libya or whatever, Timbuktu, all journeys kind of have a theme.
Yeah.
Right. What stumbling blocks are you getting caught on to get to the liberation, to get to the light, to get to the solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, as much as we think we're different, we're still the same.
True. Very true.
Right? And whether it's your imagination or real life, yeah, they can mesh. Like, they can mesh, right? Because your imagination comes because of all the experiences you've seen to build that imagination. And even
Mm-hmm.
if it is pure divine guidance, that is coming from the collective of all the experiences that the collective is having.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so yeah, so it's interesting.
Yes, I agree. It is interesting. And back to the word liberation, because you mentioned that while you were talking.
Yes.
So the title of the book is Liberation, and it's the title story as well. However, all stories, one way or another, depict one act of liberation, but in different ways. So it could be liberation from a false self-image, or a toxic relationship, or a hopeless life, or inherited religious beliefs, or political influences, or things like it. So each story, tells about some sort of liberation from something,
Yeah. Well, and I think that's very powerful for the timing of this book too, because if nothing the last 2 years has made us think of, what do we really believe? What are we listening to? Who are we listening to? Do we believe what they believe? Right? And and the closeness of what people thought they were to the divides.
Yeah.
Because we're actually going, wow, we never thought you'd think that. Or wow, you really think that.
Yeah.
And coming to terms with, what does that mean for you? Right?
Totally.
Yeah, like, wishing everyone well in their chosen journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, very, very powerful. Very powerful. So
that's great.
Any last things that you're just burning to say?
What I would like to say is my book sometimes gives the wrong impression that it's mainly for women, like it's basically some stories about women written by a woman for women. I don't see it that way. This book is just for all readers of literary fiction, regardless of gender, really. So, and it's, so in my stories, I usually try to focus more on the feminine side of the universe, but without overlooking the masculine side of things. And by that, I mean, like in this book, you will find creativity, but also structure. You will find intuition, but also reason, imagination, but also facts, emotions, but also logic. So this book takes you on a journey of surrendering to life, but at the same time, trying to dominate the world. So both sides are there. So I just wanted to say that because a lot of people just assume that it's mainly for women, and this is not how I see it, or this is not how I intend it to be.
Well, and I hear that, and hear the fact that if men want to understand the feminine
Thank
side.
Thank you for saying that. Definitely,
Right?
that's
Because,
a big part of it.
Well, yeah, because it's like we have all these books and novels about understanding them.
Yes.
Well, maybe we got to start getting it the other way.
Why
are they feeling this way? Why are they feeling hurt? Why are they feeling misunderstood? Why are they feeling, right? And because as much as we're coming out of the male dominance, it's the females that have always picked up the pieces. Right? When you look at the studies of all the people that are incarcerated, it's no male influences, low reading capabilities. And I even heard, like, not to get off topic, but I even heard of statistics that they take the grade 3 testing in the US and know how many more jails they'll need to build.
Wow.
That's got to change. If it's one book at a time, one story at a time, one hug at a time, we got to change those statistics. And as a human race, we've never been here before. And so let's start liberating now, so we all can grow and learn, because it's not about man, woman, it's about masculine, feminine.
Totally.
And
yeah, like it's not a conflict, it's not a fight between men and women. It's more, what we need mostly is reaching this point of harmony and finding a good balance between the feminine energy and the masculine energy.
Well, and even in my own life, I've been trying to figure that out, because it's like, you know, I was in that male oil and gas of Calgary and going, oh, I can't do this as a female. Right? Because I used to be in the talk rooms going, so how you feeling? What's going on? Right? Yeah, right. Trying to balance that feminine in that big masculine world. And
that actually reminds me of, like, talking about equality between men and women. And as I said, we've come a long way for sure, but we still have a long way to go. One of my dreams is to, like, one day to find this comparable equal pay for professions dominated by women versus professions dominated by men, because we're not there yet, you know.
But even if you take an engineer to an engineer,
even that.
But I also know, as an engineer, I know a lot of women making a hell of a lot more money than men. More.
Oh, okay.
Because they've gotten good at the tools of their voice.
Okay.
They know who they are. And they know there's more jobs.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. But my argument is about the professions dominated by women. For example, just as an example, teaching, especially in elementary school, nursing, childcare, all these things are not paid close to equal to other professions like engineers or, like.
Well, they won't be, because we don't value people looking after our children.
Thank you. And that's not how it should be. That's not a healthy world.
No.
Until our world decides to learn more about the feminine energy and embrace it, and how to benefit from it, and how to value it and give it the right, fair dollar amount, in terms of jobs and work. We're not a healthy world,
Yeah, but I mean, but it goes further than feminine and masculine, because it goes down to race. It goes down to who, like, even back at the wars, who, like, the white people were given loans, the black people, the Hispanics, like the Indians, were not given loans to come back and build. Like, so, and then you wonder why we have all these white neighborhoods, because they weren't given any options. They were the only ones given the right. And then I think about, like, a school I used to work with. They're 80% male teachers, and I'm like, that's so weird, right? And I said, aren't you guys worried about losing your job, because they have to apply every single school year for their job next term?
Oh, okay.
And I said, like, that's crazy. And they said, no, we do our job, so the parents always give us back our job.
Okay.
Like the school board, the city school boards and the Catholic school boards, they don't have to apply for the job, so they can slack off and do whatever. These guys every single year. Right. And I remember the grade 9s coming, going, oh, I don't know if we're prepared for grade 10. Like, we're so scared. And the teachers are like, you got it. You're fine. Saw them the next year. They came back and they're going, oh my God, no, they don't know anything. Those kids weren't prepared for high school at all.
Mm-hmm.
And they're giving their teachers big hugs for preparing them for the world, not just for grade 10.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And even to this day, like I'll see some of these kids and I'm like, why are they going to talk to me? Like I was just a helper, whatever. And they're all like, oh my God, we haven't seen you forever.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have done that in their age. Seeing an
Yeah.
adult, like I wouldn't have gone up and given hugs or saying hi. Or, no. So the job pay scale, you go into teaching because you love kids, you love teaching. You don't go into it for money.
I agree, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be valued fairly for the work you do. Like I'm talking
know,
about how
but
the world sees it or looks at
But to
it.
get valued the way the world sees it, we have to break down the old structures.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at
we have given no value to the education system. We have given no value to the healthcare system.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's part of it too.
We gave value to the government system, and that hasn't worked.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that has to come down. Like all the
Yeah.
religions, all has to come down. And I think
Yeah.
that's where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's why it's so important that we got to stay out of the muckety muck and keep our vibrations higher.
Yeah.
In order to move forward. And I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Calgary is the largest homeschooling system of North America.
Oh, really?
Because Calgarians know they waste so much time supposedly schooling the kids.
Okay.
And they're not. They'd rather school them in the morning from 9 till 12:30 and then go activities, because we're active people in Calgary. We're out and about, we're finding things. And there's so many families and curriculums and that you can do homeschooling that, they're laughing. So, and they've figured a way to get the whole social stuff. Before, when it started, the kids weren't getting the social, right? But now it's like, no, they book out the whole auditorium to see Sound of Music, whatever. They book out the whole park to do whatever. They book out, right? Because all the kids are coming from all over around. Right. And that was the other thing with this school too, that the teachers had to book in, was one day I walk into the school and they're 4x4 and the kids are screwing around the gym. And I'm like, what? And the teacher looks at me. They wouldn't sit and do math, so we're running them. They're running their math tables.
Okay.
Rather than trying to sit there and like they're ants in their pants, they can't sit there. We'll just run them. So then when they actually get home, they actually can share their day with their family because they ran that energy off. They don't make them sit in a desk if they can't sit in the desk at that moment. Want to sit on the floor? Sit on the floor.
Yeah.
Right. Different way of looking at things, and it's all coming. It's all evolving. Because I had most of my good friends growing up in school had parents as teachers, so I have utmost respect for teachers. And they do it because they love it, not because of the pay, especially in the US. Teachers in the US pay more into their classroom than they make.
Which is sad. Like I see that this is not the way things should be,
Yeah, but that's how the governments have set it up. The richer the area, the more supplies you have.
Well, and that's not, I mean,
but the richer the area,
the government set it up.
But you got to remember, the government set it up based on when you came back from the war, you were allowed loans and the others weren't.
See, and you said it, the root of this is that governments don't give enough attention or value to education in general, right? And that's not right.
But I'm just gonna, so thank you everyone who tuned in for this conversation. And once again, her book is Liberation, Secrets of the Soul.
Mhm.
And this is Adele from Transition Clarity with Authentic Conversations.